Today we're going to be taking a step back, more generally, into cleanup crew and dividing them into more useful categories into the specific ecological niches they form in our tanks. So the grazers, absolutely imperative for being able to remove all the algae growth that can and will occur as a hallmark of a naturally growing and thriving reef aquarium. So let's move on to the substrate itself. Let's move on to the sand sifters. Okay. Sand sifters. We have a whole layer of substrate in our aquariums, unless you're going substrateless, in which case you still have areas of detritus that will build up that have to be entertained. But sand. Most aquariums are dependent on sand. Now, whether or not you have sand of a various particle size, composition, or depth, that's a video for another day. By the way, like and subscribe if you want to see that video. So we'll talk about keeping the sand clean here. So, wonderful example right here. We have a Florida sea cucumber, Halothora floridiana. What is it doing? It's taking these long projecting tentacles that they have, these oral tentacles, and taking up particles of the sand. Now, the entire interior of this sea cucumber is a giant waste treatment facility full of resins and giant clumps of bacteria that are able to utilize all the organic matter and poo from the substrate itself, rendering it just inert and clean again, just like when you put it into the aquarium. This makes the sand not only look wonderfully white and clean in appearance, but the sand is not perfectly sterile. It's actually lined with a little bit of the bacteria from the cucumber's gut as well. So it's going to keep that space, that small particle of land on that sand, occupied for just a little longer, and potentially prevent the buildup of anything else that you might see that would make the sand look a little bit more dirty. So we see here other forms of sand sifters that are very important, not only for removing excess organics in the sand line, reducing the amount of actual uneaten waste and feed inside the sand line, but they're oxygenating the sand line. They're constantly exchanging it with itself and providing amounts of oxygen, and they're also contributing the byproducts of their good own gut microbiome. You see here another good example, a conch or a whelk. Various different species like the fighting conchs have been widely applied as sand sifting agents. They have these wonderful extending mouths that again pick up sand particles, process them through this wonderful gut of theirs, and then secrete bioactive, clean sand. Some other good examples could be seen of some fish. Some wonderful sleeper gobies and other sand sifting gobies, diamond gobies are wonderful examples of fish that are sand sifters because they've specialized filtration elements inside their gills that allow them to sieve out organics and other particles and then just extrude those. And then sand sifting starfish are another wonderful example of things that have long projecting feet that are constantly cleaning and scrubbing the sand at a level that simply couldn't be entertained by an aquarist, no matter how diligent they were actively working their sand bed. Other things live inside the sand, such as spaghetti worms and the like, that actually undergo active filtration living inside the sand itself. So they also warrant their own appreciation and the like. Dove snails and Neisseria snails are other good examples of smaller cleanup crew agents that specialize in sand sifting behavior. So the sand sifters, we do love those. So let's move on next to filtration, filter feeders. The next major group is comprised of two major elements. These are the filter feeders, those that are actively feeding on particles, zooplankton, and bacteria, other living things in the water column. Sabellid worms, a wonderful example. Their entire mouth is this gauntlet of filtration apparatus. They too are participating in the cleaning of your tank by taking anything, all that bacteria, plankton, all of that algae, anything that's living in your water column is absorbing the excess phosphorus, organic carbons, nitrogen. They are assimilating those into their own cells, and they can either present attacks on the filtration, be removed via water change, or they can be further enveloped and processed inside a filtration organism. This can apply to a wide variety of organisms that feed on a wide variety of particle sizes available in the water column. Things like oysters, electric scallops, tridactylid clams, especially juvenile tridactylid clams, specialize in filtering out algae-sized particles, much like the Reef Genetics line that we sell here to especially keep these animals alive. Other things such as sponges specialize in feeding on bacteria and other smaller sets of microalgae. Things like these sabellid worms are a little bit more specialized in taking on larger particle-sized foods, maybe even things like the size of copepodnoplei. But this is a wonderful time to also acknowledge that every coral that you have in your tank participates in this filter feeding set of cleanup crew. They too have feeding tentacles in various forms of apparatus to utilize that planktonic flux that arises from the natural end waste product. So all of that excess stuff that is released from the various activities and reservoirs throughout the aquarium become assimilated inside the water column by planktonic bacteria and algae and the like. And then we have this set, cleanup crew agents, that can directly absorb all those once they're packaged inside of the cell of something that they can consume. So now, the second set in this group number 4, let's talk about things that are not enveloped inside of a convenient bacteria cell. Let's say there's just a bunch of phosphate and nitrogen compounds that are not localized inside of the cell of anything. What can filter out those? This cleanup crew set we'll talk about next. Well, we've seen how the first 4 major groups of cleanup crew can directly intercept any gram particle of food that we put in the aquarium. Now that food that we put in the aquarium, be it frozen mysis, frozen phytoplankton, live copepods, anything of the like, once that food is processed by a fish or something else eating it, it can either have one of many routes that we've explored already. A solid piece of food like an uneaten pellet can be intercepted by a hermit crab or a shrimp or another direct picking feeder, or it can break down a little bit and be used to grow a myriad of different biofilms and potential pest algae. This is where we have our grazers, such as our urchins, our snails and the like, to put a lot of pressure on all this early growth so that we don't see it in excess and we don't see it cloud what we consider to be a nice, clean, charismatic reef. The third set we saw was when this waste inevitably built up in the sediment, and we had all these various things like sea cucumbers, conchs, and sand-sifting starfish to pioneer and explore inside the aquarium and be liberating and oxygenating all of this different space. Then we saw if these wastes arise and are given access to all kinds of different algae and bacteria inside the water column when they're illuminated, they can be directly filtered upon by sponges and yes, our corals, filter feeding worms, all manner of different things that have the ability to filter feed on particle-sized organisms from bacteria all the way up to small pelagic copepods. Now, the last group of cleanup crew agents was arguably the one we should have talked of from the first. We could either go large to small or small to large. So this is for all that other waste in the aquarium that hasn't been intercepted. This is the waste that's still expressed in the form of nitrogen or phosphorus and the like. It's still available. It can actually end up being read and measured with our water quality reports, and if left unattenuated and unabated, can directly arise all these different pest algae and other issues that no matter how much cleanup crew snails that we have, will always, the pests will always outgrow them. So how do we intercept this base fuel from the pest organisms that we do not want to be growing? Well, the most important aspect of cleanup crew in any reef aquarium is this. It is both the live rock and the media completely lined with different organisms and bacteria that are consuming ammonia, organic nitrogen, organic carbons. They're absorbing nitrite, they're absorbing phosphorus, and they are regulating all of these different things, reducing them from building up in excess in the water column. We also have things like macroalgae, like the gracilaria, and a little bit of chaetomorpha that we see to the right, and some caulerpa that we see to the left, that is also directly intercepting and consuming these phosphates and nitrates before they can wind up in another unwanted pest algae, let's say growing on the glass right in the middle of the display tank. So by utilizing this set of cleanup crew, we are not only competing with pest algae and regulating the flow of nutrients in our tank, but the activity and the very presence, dominance of these beneficial agents actively suppresses the growth of those that we don't want. So, for the most part, those are the 5 major elements of the cleanup crew. We have the pickers, we have the grazers, we have the sand sifters, we have the direct filter feeders, and we have the bioabsorbers. We have the biofiltration. By utilizing, recognizing, and entertaining the needs of all 5 within the context of which coral and fish we want to keep alive in our aquarium, we can master not only keeping those organisms we want alive, but ensure that the aquarium that we display them in It looks absolutely fantastic. It is free of fuzzy-wuzzy, unwanted jungle growth. Thank you. We'll look forward to talking about all these different classes of organisms in more detail in future episodes. We will see you next time. And please remember to subscribe, like, support our efforts to inform the reef aquarium public about all the wonderful organisms that they have crawling around in their tanks. We'll see you next time.